a little bit of a beginner tutorial for using Git and source control. If you're new to source control, it's just a way of managing your files and source code with a team or just with yourself, that you can save your work and not have to worry about it, losing it in case your hard drive crashes or whatnot. You can store your source code on a local staging environment that's local to your PC, or also on the cloud or the web, so that if your device goes down, you can easily recover. Back in the day, we used to use the USB sticks to share source code, but now you certainly are not bound by hardware. You can be anywhere and download your work. So first of all, you're going to need a Git installer. So I'm on the Windows platform, so I have already downloaded this already. You just click the download and run an executable. That would download, you'd run it. Provided that runs, you go to your command prompt, and then you would verify using the Git command that it's actually there. You can see that I got some kind of feedback. Quick command is Git version. So I'm on Git version 2.38 for Windows. So that's good. We know we're there. And then next you have to set up your repository. So github.com, you have to go through this basics to get set up and sign in with an account. I've already done this, obviously, linked to a particular email. Once you've gone past the screen, then you'll have basically this dashboard. I've already created one repository, but we could create new ones if we needed to. But I have one just set up already. Repository. Click into repository full stack 1. So right now I have a place that I could store code. It's empty right now, aside from a README file, which I already committed. I'll show you how to do that. And what you do right away is you can initially go to, so I can navigate back because I know already that I have, so I'm using this change directory command, CD, to go to my root directory on Windows DOS. dir is the directory structure. I'm looking for Gemini Matrix -Git. Professional tip: if you start typing something and press tab, it'll auto match for you, and you don't have to retype the whole keyword. I've been doing this for a long time, and I got to tell you, I only learned that a few years ago. I used to try to type everything out until somebody looked over my shoulder and mentioned that to me. So now I'm in this repository right now. Normally you'd run a command called git init, but we can do that if we want. Git init, that'll initialize this repository, this folder for Git. And what that does is it creates, you saw it doesn't show it, but it actually created in the directory structure, it created a .git file folder that basically does a little bit of setup to allow us to initialize. And also, one thing you may need to do, I've already done this on my machine, but I just want to mention it because I'm gonna clone the repository and pull it down. But you may get into some kind of issues where your Git is not kind of configured for running under a certain username and email. So if that happens to you, you have to run git config -- global. So you're configuring the global environment with your username, which is your name. In quotes, so I don't know. Let's just say I had that. So that would be my global configured name, and then whatever email you signed up with. So I had signed up previously, and it was a Gmail account. That's what I registered with, and that'll help me with any permission issue if you happen to run into that type of issue. Just to mention that command. So I have an initialized Git folder. I've already signed up. I've already installed it. So I would like to just pull this repository down. This has a very one file, but it could have source control. So you go into your repository, you click you can click this, let's see here. You can do a clone repo, or you can just grab this URL. You can download the entire repository as a zip file, like I said, but that's kind of more old school because you're downloading the files in that current state, and you're not necessarily being able to, like, you could modify the files and then send the zip file to somebody else. You could do that, but you're defeating the purpose of shared source control. So we have this cloning URL, this URL to this Git repository. So if I want to pull this repository down, what I would do is I would just run this command git clone, and then I would give that Git URL to it. And what that's going to do is, you can see it actually pulled down from the remote environment. And if I inspect that, it looks like I have the full stack repository. I'm going to use the tool Visual Studio Code. If you don't know what that is, it's an editor from Microsoft, Visual Studio Code. It's free. It's for Linux, Mac, and iOS. You just download that, and it's a very nice, lightweight, they call it IDE, right, editor. So you can see there now I have a repository with one file in it that's being tracked. So we have our local repository that's been downloaded, and we can make a first commit. Like, we could add a new file here. This will be just a test.txt file perhaps, and make sure maybe it's in the folder structure here. So I'll move it in there. So I've entered some text in here, and one thing to note is if you are actually using Visual Studio, you will see that sometimes it will, if you use this tool and it is under source control a project, you will actually be able to interact with the repo with this kind of UI. But for right now, we're using command line because command lines can be a little bit scary. If you don't like using this command prompt, this DOS window for whatever reason, you don't really need it right now, because now we have Visual Studio Code, and all we have to do is either go to terminal window and start a new terminal window, or we could right click this guy and say open an integrated terminal. What that does is it will take us to the folder, exactly the folder path where we're working from. So now I can interact with Git and everything from this command line, which makes it super convenient because I can stay in this window now without having to switch windows. So I made a change. If I run another command called Git Status, it'll tell me that there's a file that's been added, but it's not necessarily tracked by Git. If we would like to track this, we need to run a command called Git Add. Git Add star, add everything, Git Add dot, we'll just do Git Add everything. So you'll see that prior to this, it wasn't tracked. It was in red. I run Git Status, and you can see there that now it's kind of changed color a little bit. The editor says that there's a new file that is tracked called test.txt, and it's known. So what that means is it is actually known to, there's two repos in Git. So there's the one that exists in the cloud, in the internet, and then there's a local staging repo on my PC. So I can commit the file as it. So if I were to run a command cls just to clear this out, and DOS clear kind of clears out all your previous work, I could run a commit now that I've added commit. So usually give a pretty descriptive commit message for other people who may look at the logs later on. So added a test file, and I'm going to commit that. So that's committed my changes, which then is tracked, and you can always go back on your commits and all that. So, and if you noticed, I'm sorry, it was git commit -m for your message. So Git has a lot of flags along with commands, and it's a very command-driven CLI command line interface, so you can do a lot with it. This is a very basic flow. I'm just going to show you how to add a new file, commit it, make some changes, and then commit it to the that repository that exists on the web. So if I were to do git log, which is another command, you'll see that it'll give me a list of my commits, which is really important later on, because you can go back for some reason. If there's a problem, you can go back to a commit, and they have a hash to signify where you could go back to. Right now, there's a pointer on this current one, which is called the head pointer, and it's the main, and it's on the main branch. So anyhow, I have this README file, and I'm just going to quickly make a change. I'll just say this is a change during the demo. Right, so now I've changed an existing file, Git Status. I can see it's modified, but not tracked. So I'm going to add that guy. Again, I'll clear this to bring us to the top. Git Status, so it's been tracked. And now I'll do another commit. And you can stack these commits, but I'll keep them separate for now. Modified README file. So now git log will show now I have the initial commit, which was the initial checkout, the cloning. Then you can see my comment here. I added a test file. We just did that, and then we modified the README file. So that's part of our flow. And then I guess what I'd like to do, obviously, is persist this now. We don't need this window. I'd like to persist this to our main branch here. And I'd like to reflect the changes. So the last step to this flow is, now that I've added two files and I've committed them to my staging, now you want to do a command called Git Push. And when I run Git Push, it'll say I need permission denied to Mike Denton. So what I need to do is I would need to then actually run that git config, because I actually have this running under a different account. So I need to actually do that thing in the beginning. I didn't think I'd run into this, but now I need to get into this, where I run that command, the git config, against that new email and user that I had already registered my second account with. Kind of interesting. I didn't expect to run into this, but let's do that. So I'm going to run as this git config global, username, what I had already previously had done, general matrix, git config, global flag, user.email, and I believe I registered under this particular email. So if I wanted to solve this problem on this repository, I can actually go back to my dashboard, click settings, and on my repository, there's an option for collaborators. It's actually how you share code. So I searched already for this particular user, which I'm logged under my local PC, and I've added him, sent the invite, and then you can see right here that you can see the invite is pending. So all I need to do is accept. And now it says I have access. You now have push access to this repository. We go back to my dashboard here. I'll just refresh this guy a little bit. See that he's a collaborator. Now when I go back to my IDE, I should be able to do that final push. So if I want to commit to that repository now, so see Git Push, it actually did upload to that repository, which is great. We go back to the repository, full stack, and you can see here, Mike Denton modified this 16 minutes ago, but I finally pushed it. There's 3 commits which we worked on. You can see our change here, the change demo, and you can see that our test.txt file is there and uploaded as well. So this is actually a good example. We created a Git repository, we downloaded Git, we made some files, I had a situation where I had another user on my computer, which is myself, because I have 2 repositories. I added that user to be a collaborator in my Git repo, accepted the invitation. Then I was able to have access to push. So now, actually, you can see now there's 2 collaborators. I could under 2 accounts or 2 different people could be working on this repo and sharing work. Yeah, and I mean, if there was, I guess, one last thing to show the flow, if I just happened to make a change here, even if I made a raw change, so I'm going to make a raw change to this text file, and actually right here, we'll go back, we'll click the pen, which is edit this file, and then we'll just say this is the raw changes on GitHub. So we're actually committing those changes with we're directly working with the repo. We got to do the same thing, but through this IDE. So that's my commit message. So when I commit those changes, this is now part of it to just close off the flow. Now, if I want to go the other way and I want to pull those changes down, you can see here my TST file locally doesn't have those changes. I would need to do, instead of pushing, I need to pull. So you'll see here it pulled, and you can see it did, because it says fast forward, there's +2 lines. You can see now that we've updated and got the changes from the repo. I manually did it, but if there was other teammates or collaborators pushing, in order to keep everything in sync with source control, it doesn't matter where I am, I can always pull the latest and keep in sync with code. And that in itself is the value of Git and the value of source control.